I'm going to show you how to move the pieces. If you know how to move the pieces, then you don't need to watch this video. The first piece we're going to learn how to move is the rook, the one that looks like a castle. So the rook. The rook is very easy to know how to move. All you need to know with the rook is it moves in straight lines. Okay, so we can move. Let's look at the white rook first. So the white rook can move to this square, 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 and so on. We can move into any square. Not that one. Okay, we can move to any square that's straight. So any of these squares the rook can move to. So let's pick one. Okay, let's move here. Okay, now it's black's turn. Black also has a rook. So you're right, black can move to any of these squares, just like we saw with white. So let's move one square to black. Okay, so it's white's move again. White can move to any square that's straight. Okay, let's say white moves here. Okay, now something has changed. Now it's black's move. Can black move here? Sure. Can black move here and take white's rook? Yes, black can do that. Okay, and black can still move to all the squares that he could before. Okay, well, let's say black is not paying attention. Black moves here instead. Okay, now white has the same things. White can move to all the squares that he could before. Now, can white move all the way over here? Well, no, he can't. He cannot jump over pieces with rooks. Only one piece can do that, which is the knight. We'll talk about the knight later. But you can't jump over pieces. But you can take the rook, like this. This is the rook. Let's go ahead and look at the next piece. Okay, this piece is called the bishop. Let's look how the bishop moves. So the bishop moves on a diagonal. Okay, let me show you what I mean. So the white bishop, it can move to the square, the square, the square, yet all of these squares the bishop can move to. Okay, let's pick one. Alright, so the bishop moves here. And black moves the same way. Black can move here. And move here. And just like the rook, the white bishop or the black bishop cannot jump over pieces. So, for example, the white bishop cannot move here. But it can take black. Black can't take the white bishop. Okay, so bishop easy, it moves on diagonal. Now notice that the bishop will never move off of the light colored square here. It will always be on white squares. It can never go to a dark square. Let's look at the next piece. Here we have the queen. The queen is the most powerful piece in the game. Now the queen can move like the last two pieces together. So the queen just moves like a rook and a bishop together. So anytime it can move straight, anytime it can move diagonal. So where can the queen move? Well, let's look at the white queen. The white queen can move anywhere, here, 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 just like a bishop could. All of these squares the queen can move to. But it can also move like a rook. So any of these squares it can move to. That's a lot of squares. A lot more than any other piece can cover. That's why the queen is so powerful. Okay, let's pick one. And the black queen, just as the white queen, has lots and lots of squares to pick from. Okay, so we'll pick one over here. And just like the rook, just like the bishop, the queen captures just like it moves. So if white makes a really stupid move like here, then black can just take the queen. Okay, so queen is easy to understand, but it takes a bit to get used to because there's so many squares that it can move to. Let's look at the next piece. Here's the knight. The knight is the hardest piece to learn how to move because it doesn't move in straight lines like the bishop or the rook or the queen. The knight moves in an L shape. I'll show you which squares the knight can move to. So let's look at the white knight first. So it can move to here, 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 and that's all. If you look at how the knight moves, it looks like it goes in an L here and here. Okay, now it's black's turn. So where can the black knight move? That's right, over here, over here, over here, just like before, an L. Now one thing that's a hint is the black knight, starting on a light colored square, will have to move to a dark colored square. If you look at the squares it can go to, they're all dark. Now when the knight moves, it's now on a dark square. And the next square that it'll move to will be a light square. So let's move these knights around a little bit so you can see how they move. Okay, white can go there, black can go here. Okay, now let's look. Now, white is now on the edge of the board. So where can the white knight move now? Well, let's see. It can move here, 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 here. So not as many as before. That's why the knights don't do well on the edges of the board. It can only move to 4 different squares here. Whereas before, it can move to 8. Okay, let's move the knight a few more times, and you can try to see how these pieces move. Okay, now I said earlier, the knight can jump over pieces. It's the only one that can. See how the knights jump over each other? This is perfectly fine. You can do this. Okay, let's look at the next piece. Now, you might have noticed that the pieces in the corners were there on every piece that we looked at. It's a good idea to keep them there because you can never have a chess position without 2 kings. The kings can never be taken. We'll look at that more later, but let's just look how they move first. Okay, the kings just move 1 square at a time. They can move like a bishop, they can move like a queen. Excuse me, they can move like a queen, but only 1 square at a time. So the king is not a very strong piece. Okay, and you can see the kings just move 1 square anywhere around it. So where can it move? Yes, here, 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 here. Now, the king can take pieces, but the king can never be taken. Remember that. We'll look at the special things about kings in another video. Okay, now we have the starting position. I will show you how the pawn moves from this, because the pawn is also a bit of a special piece. It's also the least valuable of all the pieces, but it also has special rules of how it moves. So the first thing to know about a pawn is on the first move of the game, or its first move, it can move 1 or 2 squares forward. So we could go here, 2 squares forward. Okay, now black. Black has lots of moves. This pawn could go here, or it could go here. The next pawn could go here or here, and so on. Every pawn can move 1 or 2 squares. And remember, the only other moves that could happen would be to move the knight. You could move the knight here if you'll remember, because the knight can jump over pieces. Okay, but let's move a pawn. So let's move here. See, you can move 1. Now, can white move another pawn 2 squares? Sure. Anytime the pawn is on its first move, not just the first move of the game, it can move to. So this pawn can move here. This pawn can move here. This pawn can move here or here. Any of them can move here or here. So any of these would be okay moves. Okay. I want to go here. And black decides that he wants to move 2 squares as well. Now, the pawn is the only piece that doesn't move, doesn't capture in the same way that it moves. We looked at the other pieces. They take other pieces, just the same way they move. The pawn doesn't. So we cannot move our pawn forward and take. So instead, the pawn captures on a diagonal. I'll show you what I mean. This pawn can take this pawn like this. And this pawn can take this pawn like this. Okay. Now the 2 pawns that are up there in the middle of the board, on d4 and d5, they cannot move forward. They're stuck. They can't move until something else happens. Let's say the white plays this move. Now this pawn can move now because now it has a piece it can take, like this. And their pawns can continue to move. Of course, we wouldn't want to move pawns if we were playing a real game. But let's just look how they move. Hopefully you can see how the pawns move. This would not be a good way to start the game, but we're just learning how to move the pieces right now. So go ahead and play around with all of these pieces. Make sure that you're moving them in the right way. This is the end. These are just, you should have just learned how to move the pieces. Now there are more rules, so you don't know how to play chess just yet. So we'll look at the other rules in the next video.